how to put together a description and pitch that is going to be of interest and really attract people to your message, which is something that you do often, and offer that service to others. And I certainly valued your opinion in that space.
Thanks.
Yeah, why don't you give just a tiny introduction about who you are, and then let's jump into some of these topics.
Yeah, so Bianca Woods, Senior Manager of Programming at the Learning Guild. I'm still getting used to saying Learning Guild, not E-Learning Guild, because that's just a very recent switch, but I'm getting there. And so that work basically encompasses putting together the sessions and other kinds of programming aspects for in-person and online events. Working with speakers, trying to keep track of what the newest things out there are that people are interested in, to make sure that our conferences are actually, what attendees are looking for, seeing how we can push the envelope on things, try out new stuff. Like, it's a pretty nifty job. And I've been with the Guild for a little over 4 years now.
Right.
I also have a small side hustle where I have a company called Clever Raptor. And this company, it's just me. And I do consulting on instructional design and presentation design with kind of a focus on the visual side of things, how to polish that up, make sure it's enhancing what your message is. And other than that, I've been in instructional design for over a decade now. And before that, I used to be a classroom teacher.
Terrific experience. I think the classroom teacher component is really helpful for instructional designers. A lot of us come from, a subject matter expertise background where we know how to do a performance really well, but the instruction component is often the most important component, and what engages a student.
Yeah.
And having seen that live and be able to adjust on the fly with a room of kids or adults.
Adult kids.
Yeah, it gives you a sense of the type of engagement that's necessary in order to make a piece strong. If you don't mind, let's dive into something that part of your work that I have admired for a while is your time and attention with visual design in learning and development. And I might kick it off this way in saying that I think there's a great deal of anxiety felt by instructional designers to make sure that their material really looks good. And I think that stems from it's a lot easier to have an opinion or critique visual design than it is the instructional component. And how we treat instructional events to make sure that they're effective is really where our focus is aimed. And a lot of us have pretty decent visual skills, but I think, we know that we're going to get critiqued on how things look. What works, and we have some advice for people who are kind of in that space of, I want to make sure my stuff looks the best so that we can focus on the instruction and not fiddle around so much with what are the fonts and the colors and those types of things.
Yeah, I mean, the anxiety is something that I've talked to a lot of people about. And it's interesting. So when I was a classroom teacher, one of my teachable subjects was art. And, people, even when they're kids, they have that anxiety about the visual side of things. And it's hard when you have an idea in your head and it comes out and it's not what it looked like in your head. And it's very frustrating, especially because we're surrounded by great design all the time. So even if you don't have the visual design training, there is part of your brain that's kind of keying into all the stuff you see around you, magazines, advertisements, product design, that kind of subconsciously gets a sense of this is good and this is bad. So even if you can't articulate why something is good or bad, you have these sort of subconscious guidelines guiding you. And it's frustrating for people when they know something's not great, but they don't know how to fix it. And it's also frustrating, like you brought up, when you're trying to get feedback on content and maybe the person, the SME or the stakeholder that you're reviewing with, maybe doesn't have the greatest sense about what's right and wrong with the content, but has a lot of sense about, I don't like that color green. Can you make it a differenter green? And they get totally distracted and go on this whole tangent about the thing you don't want them to look at. So there's a lot to unpack there. First, let's talk about that anxiety about just the design in general. Because I do think that there's a lot of people who are like, I don't have artistic skills. This isn't a thing I can ever learn how to do. Either you're born with these skills and can do it, or you can't. And as someone who has been an art teacher, I always push back on that. And it's none of this stuff is inherent. It's not magically just imbued in your body. When you see people who have really great design skills, it's because of a whole bunch of practice that you've never seen. You've just seen the end result of all that practice. And so it might not be a skill set everyone loves, that they want to invest a ton of time in. But I do think that every single person in instructional design or learning and development has the potential to get the basics. They really do. And it's just a matter of practice.
Yeah, it is a profession, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And it's, there's only so much a person can possibly learn. Although those of us in learning and development, we tend to be the nerdy types who are like, I want to learn everything. But realistically, not everyone is going to have professional graphic design level skills in design. We can't learn everything, but I do think a baseline is super helpful in our field of just making sure things look clean and polished so the visuals don't get on the way of your content.
Yeah, I think one of the axioms that I've heard many people spin in this particular space really has to do with engagement and making sure that the student is well motivated. And I think when we're looking at visual designs, if there's something that's just generally off-putting, as a student, it's hard to want to invest in that. And you can remove a lot of things that are an attempt to be fancy and take away some of that dissonance of what's on the page or what's on the screen to focus more in on the content. And sometimes that concept of less is more and removing is one that we really fight against, because it feels like, it's a naked page and there isn't enough on there and I need to do something more to make it pretty. Where do I stop?
Yeah. No, it's hard. And, it's not fair that if you have really great content, but it's presented in a way that's kind of dated or ugly, that people view your content as dated and ugly sometimes as a result. It really isn't fair. Unfortunately, it's sometimes what the reality is. And so I think there's a lot that visual design can do to actually enhance content. But some of what you're fighting against is also, how can visual design keep people from noping out?
Mm-hmm.
And, the last thing you want is really fantastic content that looks like it was designed in 1992, and people quickly, even subconsciously, judge the visual design as the quality of your content as well. And we never want that. So as much as I don't think visual design is all just about making it pretty in our context, that there is a component of that, like I said, it's not fair, but it's reality.
Yeah. Of the free resources that are available either on social media or online, where do you often look for inspiration?
So the thing that I do for myself is I have a Pinterest board that anytime I bump into something where I like the design of it, I just throw it into the Pinterest board. And it's literally, my board is called Design Inspiration. And so I'll just do that. It's a minute here or there throughout, a week. But if I'm really stumped or I'm feeling kind of tapped out design wise, I'll just go and browse through that. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the times it will start giving me ideas. Like, I'm not going to copy the design of something else, but I might go, oh, it's kind of interesting how that coffee package leveraged those two colors together. Maybe I can play with those two colors in my design or something like that. And it just sort of gives your brain some ideas to start chewing on, and that can kind of get you out of a slump.
Yep.
Another thing that I like doing is I take pictures of just the stuff I bump into, so that I just feel like it's really, really pretty, or I think it's done a good job of communicating information. I will also do the exact same thing for things I think are full of fail. So I actually have an Instagram account that is all hilarious warning signs. Weirdly enough, I find them very visually inspiring of like, don't do this. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
As we would say it in education, examples and non-examples. sometimes looking at something that really is full of fail does jump you out of a slump, as
Yeah.
it were.
Yeah. I think they help you answer the question, why not do this?
Yeah.
Right. And the failures also go,
Yeah.
why don't do this?
Yeah. And let's all be honest, we all have those failures in our own work as
Mm,
well, whether it's visual design failures or instructional design failures, where you go back to something you made 10 years ago or so, and you're like, oh, I am a different person now. And as much as it can be awkward to look back at that stuff, that can sometimes help you feel better about your current skills. Like if you're feeling kind of down or like you don't have great ideas, look at what you were doing a long time ago and it can kind of remind you, oh yeah, you've made a lot of growth.
hmm Let's transition to
Yeah.
talking about something I know that you're also really passionate about, which is presentation science and captivating an audience. Do you have some tips for folks who are starting to make this transition, where they might have been doing conference presentations or they might have been doing some other stuff face to face, as we start moving into a far more digital experience, to help bring what it is that they're really wishing to share to an audience and keep them engaged?
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things when you're used to in-class presentations, whether it's you're used to being an in-class teacher or facilitator, or you're used to just doing conference presentations, is a lot of the times you'll be pulling energy from your physical audience. So you're looking at the energy, you're seeing what they're responding to, you're seeing if they look like they're really into it, or if they're not, and maybe you need to course correct. If you're having interactive presentations, a lot of the time you're bouncing ideas to the audience. They're giving you stuff back. And it really can feed a presenter's energy. I'm sure this doesn't work for every presenter, but a lot of the presenters I know, they take a lot of energy away from that audience. And when you switch over to online, a lot of the times you don't see that audience. You're not getting that immediate feedback that you're probably using to kind of course correct or see what they're most keen on. So it's about, how do you find other ways to get that energy? And the thing that I've personally found that works best for me, obviously this is a your mileage may vary kind of thing, but it's worth trying, is leveraging the chat in your online presentation platform, because all of these platforms have slightly different affordances and things that you can leverage, but all of them have a chat.
Mm.
And so if you bounce stuff out to the room throughout your presentation, or like, yeah, so how many of you have ever had a time when you designed something and you thought it looked really ugly or something like that, and ask them to throw it into the chat? It's a really great way to get some of that energy back, to really feel, oh yeah, they are engaged with this. What'll be neat if you can get people using the chat, they'll chat with each other. And I know some people are like, I don't want them chatting with each other. No, as long as they're on topic, this is good. It means they're engaged. It means they're excited. And this is also another way where you can start gauging what they're most interested in, and give, because every audience is going to be a little different. So this is a way you can find out, well, what do they want to know more about? What are they most keen about that you're talking about? What are they kind of disinterested in? So yeah, it's simple, but it works.
Yeah, for sure. On the flip side of that, at the end, we're going to talk a little bit more about what's coming up from the Learning Guild. But in your work in helping conference presenters put together a good description and a good pitch proposal to come to a conference, what are some key takeaways that they should have when they're starting to fill that paperwork out for the end of 2020 and 2021?
Yeah, it's terrifying to think we're about to start launching calls for proposals for 2021 starting in like early July. They're coming, people. So start pondering now for next calendar year. But yeah, there's a couple quick tips I can give you, because I've been reading conference proposals for quite some time now. And I remember the first conference proposal I wrote, I had no idea what I was doing. I was hoping, but no one ever really teaches you this in school. The forms can sometimes be a little vague about what they actually want. I mean, we've tried to make our forms a little more descriptive about what we're hoping for, but I mean, the first time you do this, if you don't have someone guiding you, it's weird. So some of the things I recommend is go look at past programs for the event if you can. So you can get a sense of what's the scope of the event, where do speakers tend to gravitate towards in terms of how they talk about the topic. Some conferences are going to be very academic, very formal. Others are going to be more conversational, more, let's just stick this in the real world and talk about it in conversational language. That'll help you gear the voice of your proposal really well. With our conferences, one of the things we really like to see in proposals is, how is this going to be useful for the person who's coming? We always say, don't necessarily write just for us, write also for the person who might be coming. Because a lot of the times these conference proposals become your session description.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll see people and they'll write these neat case studies for one example. And they'll tell, this cool story that of things they did on at their work, but they won't do that connection of, and how will this help the person in the audience? And, people can do the work, make some of those connections themselves, but why not make it easier for them? Why not just straight out say, hey, we did this AR project and here's how it helped us, but here's how we think it could help AR projects in situations different than ours, stuff like that. Just be very audience focused. They want to get the most out of their time at a conference. They want to also pick the right session, and you as the speaker want them to pick the right session.
Yeah.
So whatever you can do to guide them on that makes them happier, makes them less likely to leave the room partway through your presentation, which, it happens, but you want to avoid it if possible. And then finally, I keep telling people, don't be vague. I'll get proposals and it breaks my heart because someone will say, well, I'm going to share 6 tips about how to film great video. And they won't tell in the description what the tips are. And that makes it really hard for me as someone reading the proposal to know, is this a fit for our event? Is this a fit for our audience? It can be really tricky because if multiple people have vague proposals that are on a similar topic, sometimes if I knew the details, it might be these 2 proposals are talking about really, really different aspects of that topic. I could have both on the program. But without that detail, I don't know. And we tend to err on the side of caution. I'll always take a proposal where they've given me the clear details about what they're planning to share over one that's vague. The thing I keep telling people is think about it like a bad movie trailer. A bad movie trailer tells you every one of the core story beats. And then you're like, well, I don't need to see the movie now. You actually want that in a session proposal because you want people, me, conference proposal organizer, then also the audience, to know if it's a good fit for their needs or not, where there's no ambiguity. And, if you like, I'm going to share 7 tips on making good PowerPoints, and you roughly say what they are, you're not giving away something that makes it so someone wouldn't want to come to the session. You can't. The proposal descriptions are too short, but you're letting people know, is this a fit for their skill set and their interests?
That last tip is really interesting. I think, when I sat down to write a description, I have in the past clearly false assumption that, other folks within this industry, since it's very, a lot of these are very industry specific, that some of these general overarching high terms mean similar things to other people who are reading, and they would infer then that this is the types of deeper level things that will be discussed in the presentation. And using high level terms often allows you to write a shorter right? And so being very descriptive and also very concise is hard. So I appreciate the advice that you give and shared throughout the community to help us figure out how to do that better, because it's not easy.
It's not.
No, and I've leaned on reading my own description back aloud to see
Please do that. Yeah, that's great advice. Because
to see if it sounds appealing or not.
Yeah, and then I always recommend people don't draft into the tool itself for submitting your description. Draft into Word or something, because then you can put it down and walk away, and then come back a few hours or even a next day later, and you'll catch things that you wouldn't have caught right after writing it, because you know what you meant to write, And so sometimes you'll fill in the holes that you haven't actually written, and then you can show it to someone else and go, hey, if you read this description, what is this you think would be in this session? And sometimes they'll come to different conclusions than you intended.
Mm-hmm. So last kind of big segue. So you've been reading a lot of conference proposals. Maybe a tiny little bit of insight into some of the solutions that you think are really gaining momentum. You don't need to give away kind of the big sections that might be in some of these future events. But there's certainly some coalescing around new techniques and new technologies. What do you think is not just something that people want to talk about and gaining momentum that way, but also gaining actual usage?
Yeah. And I mean, I'm going to throw the caveat on here because sometimes people go, oh no, next buzzword. I don't care about the next buzzword, blah. First, I don't love buzzwords either. And I think what we try and do when we're looking at our conference programming is go, okay, buzzword aside, where does this have real practical application? So I don't believe there's any one buzzy thing that is the one tool or approach to rule them all. This is not Lord of the Rings. A lot of these things have their own place. And sometimes they'll be so popular and everyone will be like, this is the thing that's going to solve everything. And then trench of disillusionment. And then it falls into where it's actually supposed to be. So none of these are a solution for everything. Very few of these things are complete replacements where we throw out what we've been doing before and this new thing takes over. A lot of stuff we've done in the past has real value. Like sometimes I'll see people talking about, well, is classroom dead? No, probably it's not. How we do classroom might change, but there's probably always going to be a place for it. So those caveats in place. There are some things that I'm seeing picking up some interesting momentum that I'm personally finding pretty fascinating. VR has been technology that people have gone, oh, it's super buzzy. I don't know that it has a real place in learning and development, but there are some aspects of learning and development where it's an amazing fit. We've seen a lot of good practical application within the military and also within healthcare services, where it's situations where making a mistake is really bad. Situations where practice in a situation as close to the real thing as possible leads to substantially better results. Situations where that kind of practice isn't practical. It's not going to be available that often. So VR simulations have been working in those fields for quite some time, actually. I'll sometimes see people go, oh, well, VR is cool, but I don't really think anyone in L&D is doing things with it. Healthcare and the military, they've been doing this stuff for quite some time. The military especially has had some money to throw at that, but healthcare as well. And there's lots of really good case studies that I'm seeing coming in of real world application of this technology. So that information is out there. It's not a fit for everything. And it's still, as much as the cost for software and hardware is going down, it's still expensive enough that it's not going to work for every situation. But I do think it's very promising. AR, similarly, not going to fit for everything, still kind of expensive. But I mean, if you think of it in terms of like workflow learning or performance support, having a visual overlay, as long as that visual overlay is well designed and simple, can give really great help in the moment. So I don't think we're as far along with AR as we are with VR in terms of how we're using it in learning, but it's one thing that I'm really curious to see how it's going to move forward, especially as things like Microsoft HoloLens is becoming more available. We keep hearing rumors that Apple's going to be coming out with some sort of AR glasses, something in the next like 3 or 4 years. We'll see if it happens, but that could be a game changer. And then I'm starting to see some really good use of data and data collection. I mean, I think about XAPI, and XAPI, people were talking about that at the very first DevLearn I ever went to in 2011, and they were still calling it Tin Can back then. And it was theoretical, but everyone was super excited. It's taken some time for it to find deeper use in our field, but I'm starting to see a lot of really great proposals coming in of, here's not just how to do it, here's how to do it in complex ways that give you like significant benefit to collecting and analyzing data in new ways, and not just collecting data for the sake of it and then storing it somewhere you never look at, but collecting it in ways where you take meaningful use of that data and can apply it to help what you're doing, to inform your choices of how you're delivering content, help you understand what people are really engaging in, what they're struggling in. It's pretty cool how we're able to interact with learning data in more complex ways now than just did someone pass or fail.
Yeah, and I'm certainly seeing that too. What I'm most excited about is in data collection is a lot of the things that we produce that are to help support people's performances really are a hypothesis.
Yeah.
That it's this material or practice with these concepts that's going to change your performance in a positive way. And we spend a lot of time in L&D asking questions about engagement and overall completion, but we're not asking enough questions about, did this affect the thing that we really wanted it to change?
Yeah.
And more and more people starting to key in on, we need to have good evidence that that is the case so that we continue our budget.
Yeah, it's nice to continue to have employment and a budget.
Yeah, and to affect the things that we want to affect. I think L&D as a community are, we're helpers, and we really want to be helping people achieve more, be confident in themselves, and not just be the thing that takes you away from doing your job or earning you money, so that you get a free lunch and time away from your colleagues. I mean, this is supposed to be an opportunity to improve, and the measurement component is the thing that's going to help all of us. It's going to prove that it was a good investment, and it's going to help us who have these hypotheses change and inform our work so that we're just producing the good stuff and we're not producing the stuff that isn't making an impact.
Yeah, and I'm hoping this will give us more ability to not do one and done things, where a lot of times the pressure is on to get it right the first time around and you're never going to go back to it. And I think everyone in learning and development knows that it's impossible to nail something 100% the first time through. You have to run it through people. You have to see how it changes over time. And having this level of data gives you good backup to go, we need to do some iterative stuff on this. And iteration is great. It's not bad. It isn't saying you failed by not getting it the first time around. It's just recognizing that, just like science, it takes a few rounds to get it to the place you need it to be. And this makes it easier to go, okay, well, this component and this component, they're landing well. People are getting that content. This section isn't quite sticking with people. Let's tweak it and get it to the right place.
Okay. So this last banner is fun. I got a note this morning from you guys. DevLearn is on, and so we're going to be getting together in person. And you've got other things coming up. Do you want to describe a little bit about what that experience, how it might be different this year, and what are we all looking forward to?
Yeah, so this 2020 has been a weird year, particularly if you are in live events, conferences, in-person training. And a lot of it's really ambiguous. And so what we wanted to do with DevLearn was we wanted to make sure it happened no matter what. So plan A is DevLearn as you know it, in person, with obviously some tweaks to make sure that the physical area is as sanitized as possible, or everyone can get in the space they need, because we want to be careful and cautious. Totally cool. And, so we've been working with the hotel space on that. They have some really great guidelines they're just doing for everything. And we're incorporating that into our work. But, worst case scenario, we don't know what's going to happen in October. So we're making sure we have a really great backup plan to have a fantastic, deep digital version of DevLearn so that people doesn't get canceled. We shift. And I mean, as much as we dropped the E from the e-learning guild name, it's not because we didn't believe the digital side is an important core of our work. It is. It's just digital's gotten interwoven with in-person. It just didn't make sense to differentiate anymore. But it helps that we have all that experience with online training and online options. So we're going to have a really engaging digital version of DevLearn if we can't do it in person. And we're also, looking at even regular DevLearn. What more can we do on the digital side to make it interesting and leverage what we know about how digital can interplay with live?
Cool. I'm excited. I'm glad
Yeah.
that there is a face-to-face event to look forward to, and we're going to get an opportunity to get some of that live and in-person feedback on thoughts and ideas. And a number of the people that I talk to regularly that speak at your events, it's the opportunity where a lot of us who live all over the country, that's the only time we get to see each other face to face. And
Summer camp.
it is summer camp, and that's an important part of all of this, I think. Well, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate all the work that you do, sharing great content online and helping thought leaders better craft their message and make sure that we're sharing in a way that's helpful and positive and keeps the brand of what great L&D can do for individuals and for organizations moving forward. I would highly recommend you follow Bianca's work. I think there's a lot of great information that she shares on a pretty regular basis.
Thanks.
Up. Yeah, you bet. Well, and I hope we get to see each other in Las Vegas, and
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do another one of these as we're leading up to that event and talk about what that experience might be like and how people can prepare themselves for the new iteration of DevLearn.
Yeah, thanks so much. And thanks for having me here today. This was really a lot of fun.
You bet. Thanks so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.